Hello and welcome to the programme. The US State Department says it will begin allowing people with valid visas into the United States. It's after a federal judge in Seattle ruled that President Trump's executive action was unconstitutional. Well, Donald Trump's travel ban originally targeted 7 mainly Muslim-majority countries. They include Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, Iraq and Iran. They also extend to an indefinite ban on all refugees. Well, after the reversal, a State Department spokesperson said those individuals with visas that were not physically cancelled may now travel if the visa is otherwise valid. While the president has reacted angrily, vowing he will overturn the decision. Here's our Washington correspondent, Richard Lister.
Few modern presidents have inspired such protest and confusion in their first 2 weeks in office. And nearly all of it directed at a single policy.
Last week, I signed an executive order to help keep terrorists out of our country.
President Trump recorded his weekly address when that order was still in place. But last night, this Seattle courthouse saw a successful challenge to his authority.
I find that the court should and will grant the temporary restraining order.
His banning order was overturned.
It's obviously a historic decision and an important one for the rule of law and for the people of the state of Washington and the people of our country. I said from the beginning, it is not the loudest voice that prevails in a courtroom. It's the Constitution.
Within hours, airlines were told by the US border agency that the restrictions on travellers from the 7 affected countries had been dropped. British Airways, Lufthansa and others reflected that advice on their websites. These Iraqi and Iranian nationals at Istanbul's Ataturk airport wasted no time boarding a long-awaited flight to Los Angeles, confident now that this time they shouldn't run the risk of being sent back. When President Trump arrived at his weekend retreat in Florida yesterday, he must have hoped that the centrepiece of his national security policy was secure. And his fury this morning was all too apparent. He tweeted that when a country is no longer able to say who can and who cannot come in and out, especially for reasons of safety and security, big trouble, adding that the opinion of this so-called judge, which essentially takes law enforcement away from our country, is ridiculous and will be overturned.
This is truly a politicized decision by a judge who doesn't understand that the law brought in the 1950s that gives the president the prerogative to determine how immigration is handled. That is the facts of the matter, and this judge needs to understand that.
The Trump administration insists that the president has the right to exclude anybody from the country on the grounds of national security. But this judicial ruling says the president's executive order does America more harm than good. So the question seems almost certain to be decided here at the Supreme Court.
And until the question is resolved, the protests will continue, not just in the US, but around the world. President Trump, though, is adamant that ultimately he is right and he will win.
Well, I spoke to Richard Lister a short time ago. He's outside the Supreme Court, where this decision could ultimately be decided. He began by telling me how US officials are reacting to this reversal.
The Border Protection Agency has told airlines that they are completely free to carry foreign nationals from these 7 countries to the United States if they're in a possession of a valid visa. The State Department, which we understood yesterday had revoked something like 60,000 visas, has released a statement saying that anybody who has a visa that wasn't cancelled by border officials previously on previous attempts at the border to get into the US should be able to be admitted into the United States. So as far as the US agencies responsible for implementing these restrictions are concerned, that presidential order has been lifted, and the 7 countries that were affected by it are free to send their nationals to the United States if they have valid US visas. The Department of Justice had said it wanted to move very quickly on this, and certainly they don't want this situation to stand any longer than necessary if they can successfully challenge that Seattle judge's ruling. So it's possible that those machinations are already underway for an appeal to be filed. They haven't announced publicly whether or not that has happened, but they did say they were going to challenge it as soon as they could.
Richard Lister reporting there. Well, it's fair to say that President Trump has faced widespread criticism around the world for this travel ban, but has some of it gone too far? This is the front page of Germany's influential magazine Der Spiegel. As you can see, it depicts Donald Trump holding the severed head of Lady Liberty. Several German newspapers have criticised Der Spiegel for carrying the cartoon, and the German Vice President of the European Parliament called it tasteless. The cartoonist Edel Rodriguez said the image represented the beheading of democracy.